Everyone knew the library was my favorite place, but no one knew why. It was because of James. I had had a crush on James for as long as I'd known him. Last 2 months, I discovered that he always came to the library and read in the side room. He was so handsome, and he made my heart thump. There were rumors that the assistant librarian liked him because she allowed only him into the room. I suspected it too. However, James told my brother, who was also his friend, that it wasn't true. He just asked her to let him use the side room, and she agreed to it. One day, I decided to go to the side room too. I wanted James to notice me and ask me to be his girlfriend. That day, I wore the prettiest skirt I owned and took my lucky jacket. I waited until she went to arrange the shelves before I crept to the side room and opened the door quietly. The room was strangely empty. The walls were covered with framed paintings of important people in our school. There was a large painting at one end, and I walked cautiously towards it. When I pushed it slightly, I was surprised to find a secret door that blended perfectly into the wall. It was the type that seemed to have no key. I became curious. How far did James have to go just to read in secret? Was he hiding anything, I wondered? When I pushed the door, I was surprised that it opened. I was in an archive that was half as big as the library. There were tall shelves everywhere. Each shelf was covered with books I could not recognize, but I was not interested in them. I just wanted to find James. Maybe if I could summon the courage, I would tell him about my crush. Who knows, he might be crushing on me too. I heard James's voice echo. My heart leapt as I walked towards the sound. I stopped in my tracks suddenly when I heard a familiar voice. There were so many things that annoyed me about the voice. First, it belonged to a female. Then the female, whoever she was giggling at James. The kissing sounds that followed made me lose it. My James! I was ready to confront her when I remembered that I should not be there in the first place. "Did anyone see you come in here?" the voice asked. "Except the assistant librarian who I tipped off as usual, I don't think so," James said. "Although there was this strange girl from our class with bright orange hair that sat near the front desk." "Did she see you?" the girl asked. "I doubt it. Even if she did, she is too weird anyway." "You probably know her," he said. The girl seemed to think for a second. "Of course I know her. She is a creep," the girl said. I was fuming. I tried to sneak out of the archive and back into the library before I screamed at them. I was not bothered that the girl said I was a creep, but James thought I was weird? How could this be? I ran to the door angrily. Unfortunately, I noticed too late that there was a stack of books near the door. I tipped over it and yelped right before I crashed to the ground. "Who is that?" James called. I heard his footsteps as he approached the door. "I thought no one knew this place," he said. I struggled to stand and I tried to push the door. I was hoping to get out before he saw my face. The door did not move. James spotted me. All the anger I felt disappeared when I saw his lovely face. He was not smiling at me, though. He was furious. He wanted to know why I had followed him into the archive. He ordered me to leave immediately. When I pointed out that I was trying to do that, he got upset. He pushed the door with all his strength, but it did not move. The girl showed up behind us, and she looked annoyed as well. I recognized her right away. She was Principal Hansen's daughter, Amy. She was in my science class, but we never spoke to each other. James asked her if she could do anything about the door. She pushed it repeatedly, but nothing happened. James took over and pushed until his palms were sore. Angrily, he walked away from the door. He yelled about a college interview he had to attend the following day. It was his dream school. He could not miss his chance. He walked to a small chair near the shelf and sat down angrily. There was no way out. I looked at my phone and realized that it was almost dead. It did not matter how full it was. There was no service in the library, and I could not reach anyone. I tried anyway. I called my mom and my dad and my brother. Each time the beep that followed made me more afraid. It became obvious that we would spend the night. I noticed a small door at one end of the archive. When I opened it, I realized that it was a restroom with no window. The tap was not running, but I was grateful that I could pee at least. I did so hurriedly and returned to the archive. I found Amy sharing a bottle of water with James, and I became very thirsty. I was really close to groveling until it hit me that she would never offer me the water. Amy did not care if I fainted. James seemed to be at her mercy. The water belonged to her. I watched them finish the water and throw the bottle aside. Amy opened a drawer that I never noticed and pulled out old bed sheets. There was a duvet there, too. It was weird to find those in such a room, but I did not ask. I just watched as she laid the duvet on the floor and used the bed sheets to cover herself. She invited James to her bed and completely ignored me. James laid next to her, and together they slept off. I wanted to squeeze myself in, but there was no room for me. Amy had made sure of it. I knew I had to make my own makeshift bed. I looked around the archive and found only books. There was no bedsheet anywhere. I arranged some big books on the floor and made myself a bed. As I laid down, I realized that I was shivering. I was surprised that my clattering teeth did not keep Amy and James awake. The archive was much colder than the library. I eventually slept off, but I woke up almost immediately to find Amy eating cookies. I was stunned that she did not think of sharing with anyone else. She knew James and I would be hungry, but she did not bother to share with us. I was angry on James's behalf. How could he like someone that was so mean? I decided that I would tell him in the morning. When I woke up later, she had beat me to it. She told James that she has a few cookies left, and she handed them over to him. I watched them eat the cookies. When I could not watch anymore, I looked around in search of anything I could eat or drink. Finally, I saw 3 bottles of water in a box covered in cobwebs. I was tempted to keep them myself, but I did not want to be like Amy. I gave one to James, but Amy refused to take the other. Instead, she pulled out a bottle of water in front of us and gulped it down. James and I ignored her. In a few minutes, we were taking turns puking in the toilet. There must have been a bug in the water. James was so tired. He talked about his interview again. It was just 3 hours away, and he could not believe that he would miss it. He told me he thought I was really pretty, and he was sorry for calling me weird. He slipped a cookie into my hand and said I could sleep with them tonight after Amy had slept. He had seen me shivering last night, and he did not want me to get sick. I was very grateful and happy. He was really amazing after all. When we returned to the room, we found Amy rummaging through an old box. She turned quickly and tried to pretend like nothing had happened. I ran to the box and opened it. There were so many snacks and bottles of water in it. I could not believe it. James was more interested in her beeping phone. Somehow there was service in it. He looked through the messages and got very angry. I don't want him to move away from town. I want us to be together forever. Are you insane? He bellowed. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. I glanced at the box one last time and I noticed a key card. I was so shocked as I took it out. I could not believe that we could have left the archive ever since, but Amy let us spend the night. I ran to the door and found a sensor. It was so easy to miss, but once I slid the card over it, the door opened. "It's open!" I cried. I heard James warn Amy never to speak to him again. He also told her that she would pay if he missed the interview. As he ran past the door, I told him that my brother could drive him to the interview. My battery was still alive and service had returned. I called my brother and he promised to be in front of the library in a few minutes. We waited until he showed up and they left together. That evening, James visited me at home. He said he had made it to the interview and it was amazing. Just before he left, he told me that he wanted me to be his girlfriend. My face was so red as I nodded eagerly. He kissed me at that moment and I knew I had arrived in heaven. I finally had James to myself.